we can move to our third speaker today, who is William Franke, teaches in Vanderbilt University. I took a quick look at his curriculum, and it seems that he's published at least 14 books on Dante and scripture and various extraordinary things. And he's got a PhD from Stanford, but he also has a master's from Oxford and from Berkeley in California. And today he's going to speak on revolution in poetic language, Dante's use of the vernacular as a vehicle for theological revelation. William.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, David. And I think I'm just really going to try and summarize some ideas from this book, which came out last year, Dante's Vita Nuova and the New Testament, from Cambridge University Press. And maybe I should start with the theme that Matteo put before us, the prosimetron, with Vita Nuova, of course, as a primary reference. And what I want to emphasize about the prosimetron for Dante is that it enables him really to introduce this theological dimension, the event of Beatrice, into his life as a savior figure. The saluto, she salutes, but it's also salvation, salute, right? He really, there's bleeding together, even linguistically. Questa salute mi salutava. Also her name, of course, she beatifies him. If we can even take it, not as a proper name, it really applies as a kind of common noun. Even people that didn't know what she was called, says Dante, they would spontaneously name her Beatrice, as if just being in her presence was an experience. They felt themselves so blessed, so full of bliss, that spontaneously this word Beatrice would come to their lips. So it really is an experience for Dante of salvation, right? Of new life, in the sense that the Christ brings a new life, the way, the truth, and the life. This book, the Vita Nuova, often taken to be the first book of Italian literature, it's Dante's first book. I think that it is really the good news of being saved by a new life, according to Dante, that it really is Dante's gospel. And he says this to us all throughout the book. Let me say something about the parallel with Jesus in the Gospels. It's an issue of, I think, of witness, and this is why the poems are so important, being intercalated, alternating with the prose, because they enable Dante to express something that cannot be expressed merely as a sequence of facts. This is what happened. No, it transforms him inwardly. And this is the experience that people have with Jesus in the Gospels. You can't really prove that he's God. What you look, you see a man. It's the experience of being transformed, being elevated to a higher level of existence, being beatified. That's really what makes people recognize Jesus as God. That's what makes Dante recognize Beatrice as his beatifier. And you require a lyrical language, not just the fact-stating language of prose. It has to be a language that testifies to an inner transformation. It is a subjective language. And what I'm really driving at here is the way in which Dante, in the Vita Nuova especially, opens up a new realm of subjectivity as a witness to religious revelation. And this is my theme, really, in all of the many books that David alluded to. Many of them are philosophical, a theory of revelation. And I really want to engage secularism. This is, it's not just that Dante's repeating the modes from tradition, he is opening a new space of self-reflection, where self-reflection of the subject becomes revelatory. It's an existential revelation, but for him, he can interpret it with the traditional language of Christian theology, and I think that's still very, very valid as one alternative. We don't necessarily have to rely on Christian theology to express this new experience of being open towards all and everything. Dante says that in Beatrice's presence, null uomo poté essere suo nemico, right? He has no enemies. And we know that this is not necessarily his temperament as a rule, right? If there was ever a combative and cantankerous character, it's Dante. But in her presence then, no, he's full of love and an infinite openness towards all others. This is the state, I think, that I want to identify as a kind of secularized revelation of the dimension that we can call divine. In any case, of an openness towards the infinite, or an infinite openness, and ultimately an openness towards the infinite, of course, being a name for God in Dante's own era. Dante is absolutely contemporary with Duns Scotus, for whom, one of the scholastic theologians, who his metaphysics is about, God as the infinite, but the infinite is really what we cannot grasp. And this is where I think Dante opens a whole new field for us of experiencing the divine in relationship in human encounters, right? It starts with Beatrice in the Vita Nuova. It's going to be expanded without limits in the Commedia, where he gives us this vast network of relationships, of human encounters that are revelatory. All of them, in some way or other, are revealing aspects of the divine in relation to the human. Of course, even damnation has to be understood theologically. It reveals something about the justice of God, about the perversion of human love. Now, it's all then a matter of witness. I think that Dante, especially in those poems, is witnessing to this experience of theological revelation. And the language, he uses the language, the subjective language of appearing, apparvemi, pareami. This language comes back insistently with all of the encounters with Beatrice, also of amore, the God of love. It's apparvemi. What's interesting is that when he meets after Beatrice's death, gentile donna, who has compassion on him, who pities him, she is framed in a window, right? He looks up and he sees her in this window, which separates him from her and makes it a more objective kind of perception. He never says pareami. Actually, there's one slight occurrence of this idiom, but it doesn't have at all the same valence of a deeply subjective experience. And I don't want to mean only subjective. It's witnessing to something of a religious order, a higher reality is what Dante experiences when he moves into this idiom of the paremi. And then, of course, consider that he gives us a theoretical reflection about self-reflexivity when he finds this materia nuova, e più nobile, the higher and more noble matter for his poetry. This is really the key to his transition into his own distinctive dolce stil novo. This is chapters 18 and 19 of the Vita Nuova, right before he comes out with Donne che avete intelletto d'amore. He discovers this style, which is purely self-reflexive. It consists in the words that praise my lady. He's not expecting any kind of reward apart from the words themselves. They become a totally self-reflexive, self-fulfillment he's been denied the saluto of Beatrice. He's been mocked by the ladies, right? The il gabbo. His ego has really been taken down. This is what opens him. But now, see, what I'm trying to indicate here is a paradoxical coincidence between the focused self-reflexivity of this new style that Dante announces. It's totally self-reflexive, depends on nothing outside of the words themselves, and yet it's all praise for Beatrice. So paradoxically, we have this orientation towards the holy other, which coincides with an absolute intensity of self-reflexivity. This is the secularization of religious revelation that I see being inaugurated here in Dante's inaugural work, the Vita Nuova, the new life, and he's going to carry it to further heights in the Commedia. And we might take one sign, for example, of, I think, Dante's discovery of subjectivity, of what's going to become modern self-reflexive subjectivity. The fact that he's so secretive about this, because he even admits that everybody knows that it was Beatrice, because he falls to pieces every time he's in her presence, and that's why the women are mocking him. And he reflects. It's very interesting that even before he comes to that, to his the new style, he takes some days to reflect. And while he's reflecting, he's walking by the clear stream, sort of symbol for inspiration, and spontaneously the words, the incipit, donne che avete intelletto d'amore, come to him. La lingua parlò come di se stessa mossa, I think are the words, right? His tongue is moved. That's a moment of inspiration, but it comes in the midst of Dante's reflectiveness. He's conversing with himself, as he puts it. Now, I wanted to suggest that this space of inward reflectiveness, which is the space of a revelation, which Dante interprets theologically. In any case, it's the breaking open to a visionary dimension of reality. This, I see Dante sort of covering over. He's covering over this with the secretive. What he's keeping secret is not Beatrice's name. It's this abyss of subjectivity that opens before him, and that it's going to open, I think, modernity in some very telling ways. If we think about the modern novel, it really is all axised on a subjective point of view. Usually one says Don Quixote, 1605, the first modern novel, and it's of course the craziness that this subjective perspective of the protagonist, which is so subjective. He sees the windmills as giants, etc. That gives the impetus to the whole story. Not to talk about Cervantes' own authorial self-reflections and alien. He deconstructs himself as author, and he has the characters within the book reading about themselves. So this this self-reflexivity, I think it really has to be recognized as the driving motive for the modern novel. Or even take Hamlet, for example. The self-reflexivity that drives him into melancholia, to be or not to be. And there's always, I think, self-reproach is part of this. We have Dante, it becomes very reproachful of himself in reflecting on the gabbo, his being mocked by the ladies. Hamlet, oh, what a rogue and peasant slave am I. The heroes of modern literature have to be reduced to a state of negativity, of doubt about themselves, in order then to discover that this hollowness, the emptiness of the self taken in itself, is broken open by relationship. And that's what frees them then to commit their whole existence to relationships with others. For Dante, of course, it's focused on Beatrice. It's going to open up into the commedia, into the whole panoply that he presents us. If I may, I would say that modern philosophy tells us something of the same story of self-reflexivity. Kant calls this the transcendental unity of apperception, building on Descartes' cogito, the I think. The I think is there in every perception, in every human experience. It's the frame for all human experience and the filter as well. I think that Dante is already discovering this, but for him, it still has, it opens him to what he then interprets as theological revelation. And others might want to take this as purely secular revealment. I'm absolutely fine with that. I do think that theology gives us a very rich vocabulary for interpreting what happens, because one is related in this experience to absolute otherness. The focus on the self ends up by evacuating the self and opening it. But the nothingness at the heart of the self, it corresponds with the transcendence of the other, right? And that would that could be God. It's Beatrice, even the God love. The fact that we can really say we know nothing of the other as such, right? There's always some sort of a blackout. Whatever we say about the other is appropriation in our own terms and vocabulary. I think we have to recognize that otherness as transcending us as well. Dante does this, right? The vocabulary of ineffability, which starts in the Vita Nuova. He cannot describe the beauty of Beatrice. As a matter of fact, what he describes are the effects on him, right? It's just like Christ in the Gospels. We don't get any information about what he looks like. What we know is how he affected and transformed them. David, I better check on time here.
Yeah, I think I unfortunately have to chair another session, so I would like, maybe we'll end a little bit early. I think we have some time now for questions or comments. Two things that you've aroused my curiosity about. The first one is that the saluto and saluto, that verb of sal, well, that's extraordinary, because when you're talking about the new life, you go back to Gabriel shows up, he says hello to the Virgin Mary, who's surprised. She's turbata because she doesn't understand how she could have a child. But then she goes off to see Elizabeth, who's also going to have a child, and salutes her. And there's the salutation there of the angel. Gabriel is now passed on from Maria to Elizabeth, and they're both going to have new life in them. They're both going to have new. So the salutation is one of those words that suggests right away the Magnificat, the holy woman, who engenders this extraordinary new thing and creates a new life for mankind, or for Dante Alighieri, or for whatever. And I think that's the place, I think, where Dante has definitely got his Vulgate in mind. And the other thing that's interesting is when you talk about the origins of modern fiction, that you centered on the two people who were that Turgenev had centered on when Turgenev was looking back at what modern literature was about, and he wrote an essay on Don Quixote and Hamlet. This is a Russian looking for, where did we come from? And he looks back and he sees those two perplexed individuals as origins of the modern spirit, origins of the novel, and so on and so forth. But I think the salutation thing is, you probably have said this in several of your books already, but I think it's,
no.
it seems to me it's a very important subtext for the whole of these Beatrice, yeah. Saluto, the saluto, and so on. And again, the fact is that the saluto also brings salute, so that it is salvation as well as a salutation. It's extraordinary. Combining.
Well, that's a terrific insight into a connection, really, with the New Testament tradition. I missed it. I think that's terrific. You're absolutely right. It's just the sort of thing that I do bring out. I mentioned the stories of the virgin birth, and because there's a discourse on mythos, right, and how story can actually become a means of revelation. But you're right, there's a very, very specific connection with the role of salutation in the New Testament. And I think it takes Dante, however, for us to really hear the resonances, the salvific resonances in that New Testament vocabulary. But it really is wonderful how those texts then do play together. Thank you very much for pointing that out. It's new to me.
Are there other comments or questions?
Yes,
Matteo?
Yes, I'd like to ask you if you found other words, if you focus on other words of the Vita Nuova, which can be related to the New Testament message, apart from saluto, salutare. Well, then you emphasized also the meaning, the meaning of apparire in Vita Nuova. Are there other words that you focused your analysis on?
Well, there are a lot of other, phrases, and I'm trying to think, what might be keywords. That's not exactly the way, my work is organized. That would be a philological approach. It's more philosophical in orientation, but nevertheless, there are all sorts of key words that emerge all along the way, and one finds the resonances of them. One could take, for example, the last sonnet in the Vita Nuova, when when the soul goes out of the body to the vision of Beatrice before God. Trying to think exactly. There is a verbal link which is very crucial. I wish I don't have the text here. What is that? Spera. We have to recall that sonnet for the important keyword that comes out of it. Let's see. Where is this? Usually, oltre la spera. That's the incipit, and it has to be oltre la spera che più larga gira. It's the sigh. That's what I was looking for, right? Il sospiro. That sigh coming out of the last sonnet in the Vita Nuova. And of course, he's spent many sighs for Beatrice earlier on as well. And it's part of the whole troubadour courtly tradition. It's the sigh that actually then journeys to Beatrice, to a vision. She is contemplating God in a it's all a self-reflexive structure. And the sospiro does connect with the New Testament as well. Jesus breathes, right? He breathes on the disciples to communicate to them their mission. That's one more example. The doubting Thomas is rather interesting as well. There is a verbal allusion to the doubting Thomas, who then proclaims my Lord and my God. Jesus invites him to put, but that passage, because Dante talks about his doubts, and it is in language that recalls specifically that passage from the Gospels. There are many more. I wasn't really prepared to recall them right here, but please do take that
Okay,
up.
well, thank you very much. As I said, I have to duck out of this session and then duck into another one. So I'd like to thank all of our participants today, Francesco, Matteo, and William. Wonderful session, wonderful information, exchange of ideas, and probably we'll see you soon in another meeting. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.